Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. You see, if you get a slot to speak after lunch, not most of the people are awake, but if you get a 6 p.m. slot to speak, half of them are not in the room, you see. So I thank you all for your patience and stamina, and thank you for being here in the room to at least hear me out. Ladies and gentlemen, I come from Pakistan. I sit in the Constitutional Court, and my toolkit to deal with issues is the Constitution and the human rights. By that I mean that I am not restricted by any national law. If there isn't any law, I could still reach out and help the common man if human rights are violated. So that's the flexibility I enjoy because of my office. I just want to bring a new dimension, not really new because it was already echoed by Professor Gerard in the morning and David Rivkin earlier in the day, a dimension to the entire debate and dialogue that we've been listening to on human trafficking, and that dimension is of climate change and natural disasters. I think this aspect needs to be brought in, and I'll just sort of explain that in a bit. Just the facts before I come to Pakistan, my story and my story as a judicial officer and how we've evolved into this area. The facts are that droughts, floods, severe storms, melting of ice caps, and consequent rise in the sea level are all consequences of climate change. Now, this is an admitted fact. We don't need to even go into it. According to experts and even UNHCR, about 9 out of 10 natural disasters are a result of climate change. And according to the experts, an estimate of 200 to 250 million people will be forced to leave their land due to extreme weather by 2050. So there's going to be a huge migration as a result of climate change. Let me take you to Pakistan and to my own story. I speak out of my experience because in 2010, Pakistan had severe floods, you see, and about 11 million people were displaced. I happened to be appointed as a chairman of the Judicial Commission to inquire into the causes of that flood, and that gave me a first-hand experience into how things were on the ground. And I had to travel about 9 to 10 districts in Punjab, which is one of the provinces in Pakistan, to understand what really happened. And that's the time when I really understood that, yes, people were displaced, and I had a chance to talk to a number of victims, even though my terms of reference at that time weren't to deal with human trafficking as such, but that sort of, a lot of things internalized at that time, and I realized that there was a huge human displacement issue attached to floods. Floods being one of our major issues in Pakistan. And let me also add that Pakistan is not a contributor to climate change. It is a sufferer of climate change. So our technique back home is to adapt to the changes that are being made all over because of climate change. And we have to think of strategies and ways forward and how to deal with these issues. So I'll come to that in just a minute. So Pakistan, you see, we've had a displacement of more than 11 million people, and now we have data which shows that this displacement has led to human trafficking, an area we haven't really explored because human trafficking is more of a reactive issue. We look at it when it happens, but we haven't really done anything prior to the disaster or pre-disaster assessment of human trafficking as such. So yes, we now have data that human displacement, especially due to floods, severe weather, and other natural disasters like the huge earthquake that we had in the year 2005, when about 18 million people were displaced. So that has led to a lot of issues like forced labor, forced marriages, and I must admit that the infrastructure in countries like Pakistan are not that strong. So if we suffer a disaster, we cannot come back so quickly. We're not disaster resilient country as such because of poor infrastructure. Culturally, our women are not empowered enough. that if in case they fall prey to all these disasters, they are very vulnerable, and so are the children. So that's an added problem if we are hit by a disaster. So yes, it has led to rape, it has led to forced marriages, child labor. Organ transplant is another thing that has happened in Pakistan, and it's called the organ transplant tourism now. A lot of people want to go get an organ transplant, and that happens in Pakistan. Unfortunately, we're looking into that too and ensure that doesn't happen, but it's happening. And that is also coming out of all these displaced persons who are so vulnerable that they're in such an economic need that they would even sell an organ to kidneys and others, in order to support themselves. So having said that, when we talk about, there's a whole new class of, if I were to call them climatically displaced persons, which are primarily women and children who fall prey to these traffickers, who may, if I may call, climate traffickers, you see, who are dealing with these issues. So how do we go about dealing with this problem? Architecturally, what I've heard over the last one day is that we've been dealing with human trafficking as a subject of criminal justice, as a separate topic. We've been homing into issues relating to human trafficking and the enforcement and the punishments relating to it. But I thought if I could just add to that debate and that narrative the dimension of climate justice also, you see. So that criminal justice, it should not be left to criminal justice, but expanded and brought into the domain of climate justice. To me, climate justice is all sorts of issues that come to court which relate to changes in climate. And it is not restricted to the courts alone. Even the executive branch and the legislature needs to also do climate justice in coming up with the appropriate laws or coming up with the appropriate policies. But as far as I'm concerned, or the court is concerned, yes, to me, after this debate and dialogue that I've heard, climate justice incorporates within it the concept of criminal justice, and the dimension of human trafficking has to be a part and parcel of climate justice. Because you can't, when you talk about disaster management in climate justice, you can't just leave it there. You need to go a bit further and bring into its scope the human trafficking issues and the related consequences. So that is important. So one thing that I want to say is that we need to start thinking of merging criminal justice and climate change justice, or climate justice, and think of it as one big holistic part of jurisprudence to start looking at these issues, which we at the Constitutional Court do. And let me then share that how do I say that. Perhaps one of the cases coming out of Pakistan, the only case, and perhaps the only case in South Asia on climate justice, is coincidentally coming out of my court, where a farmer reached out to the court and pleaded that, I might just lose out on my livelihood because there is no water in the country. And due to climate change, due to water scarcity, there will be drought in this area soon, and what am I going to do? And also, he pointed out that there is a policy which the government has, which is lying somewhere in the shelf, called the climate change policy, where the state was supposed to do something about my land or was to do something about water, and they haven't done anything. So sitting in a constitutional court, interfered, and the court wanted the government to start implementing the policy, which has been rather successful for the last several months now. All the ministries have woken up to the concept of climate change, and much to my surprise, I found out that they had little knowledge of what climate change was till the court interfered. So the case went on, and we have now dealt with the issues, the several issues relating to climate change. For example, we are dealing with now developing crops which are heat resilient. We're also looking at water policy. We're also looked at a number of other issues relating to water, irrigation, agriculture, which would help deal with climate change. So the issue would be now, in the context of human trafficking, that if you were to address the issue of climate change, or at least have adaptive measures that would curtail human displacement, that would automatically have an effect on curtailing and minimizing human trafficking. So one aspect of climate justice would be to curb or try to come up with a solution or a strategy so that the human displacement is minimum when it comes to climate change issues, be it mitigation or be it adaptation. And secondly, if it were to come to that stage where human displacement is to take place, then I think we need to start thinking of having a pre-disaster assessment and registering people, having information, providing protection to all those people, rather than talking about human trafficking later on once the events have taken place. So this is the innovation that we have come up in Pakistan, where then after that I go back from this academy and I thank the academy and Monsignor Sanchez Orondo, as well as the president, Professor Archer, for having invited me, and I've gained so much from all of you today and yesterday that I could go back now, and this case, which is a rolling review, it's a continuing mandamus, it continues, where I could now bring into the debate or into the entire exercise the dimension of human trafficking and make it a part and parcel of climate change. In the end, as a judicial officer, I think if a judge is brave, is innovative, and has his heart in the right place, we can change the world. Thank you.